The Excel object model groups objects of the same type into collections. For example, the workbook object contains the worksheets collection, which contains a worksheet object for each worksheet in the workbook. In fact, if you go up one level, the application object contains the workbooks collection, which in turn contains a workbook object for each open workbook. If you want your code to affect every member of a collection or an array, you don't have to count the number of items in the collection and work through them one by one. Instead, you can use a for each loop to interact with every element in the array or the collection. As an example, let's take a look at the code I have here. In this example, I have an array of strings, which are the names of cities to which Two Trees has shipped products within a given month. In this case, I can use a for each loop, as shown here, to move through each element within the array and display its value. There are a couple of things that you need to keep in mind when you're working with an array using a for each loop. First is that even though the array elements are defined as strings, the variable that you use to step through in the for each loop has to be a variant. That's because you can never be sure exactly which variable will occur within an array. So you use a variant. Well, actually, let me show you what happens when I change this to string and try to run the code. When I do, I get a compile error. You don't even get an execution error when you try to run it. Instead, it just says, nope, that's wrong, you can't do it. And it tells you how to fix the problem, thankfully, in the error message. So we had the error. To clear the error and start running the code again, I can click the reset button. Now I can change the variable type back to variant, and everything will run smoothly. Pressing F5. The first city is LA, Portland, Seattle, and DC. That's how you work with an array. If you're working with a collection, such as the workbook object's worksheets collection, then you must have the each variable of the same type as the contents of the collection. So let's take a look at this bottom subroutine here. In this case, I have the WBK variable, which I have defined as the workbook type, and WKS, which I have defined as a worksheet. Once again, using object variables, I set the WBK variable equal to this workbook. This workbook is a keyword that you can use to point to the active workbook. Then, in the for each statement, I have each worksheet, again, WKS is a worksheet type, in the workbook worksheets collection. Then, I change each worksheet's name to its current name with the added text test. This ampersand allows you to concatenate two strings of values together. I'll show you how to work with that in a later movie. So now, let's see what happens when I run the code. You might have noticed a change over here on the left in the VBA project panel. The sheet names changed from Sheet 1, Sheet 2, and Sheet 3 to have test on the end, which was the goal here. If we switch back to the workbook, you can also see here that the worksheet names have changed. The for each loop greatly simplifies your programming code when you want to interact with each member of a collection, such as every worksheet in a workbook. You can always add logic, such as if-then statements, to examine each worksheet's contents and determine whether to change it.